Welcome back to Hometown Friends, the podcast that explores our most foundational friendships. This episode is a short one with Mark Conway, who I went to high school with, but was never really close to him until recently. I always knew him pretty loosely and had a few conversations with him over the years, and his best friend Matt was someone I knew pretty well. And last summer, I took a road trip with him to Bend, Oregon with a few other hometown friends to go mountain biking. And on that 8-hour drive, I got to know him pretty well, and the depth of his personality began to shine through. I discussed my idea of launching a podcast about hometown friendships, and Mark understood and appreciated this concept right away. This interview was one of the first ones that I ever did, and truthfully was more of a practice run, but after reviewing it again, I decided that Mark's stories were exactly what I originally intended this podcast to be about, and they exemplified the powerful influence of friendships on our lives. Please enjoy my conversation with Mark Conway. We grew up in Berkeley together, but I know you grew up in Oakland and you had sort of a different path to Berkeley High. And yet we knew each other pretty well. I don't even know how we knew each other. We just sort of knew each other from several groups that overlapped. But you had a very different friend group than I did. So I'm gonna make some room for you because you're such a good storyteller. But the story of you sort of coming through Berkeley High and then going off to college and how your friends fit into that process of you becoming different.
Well, so, what I was kind of sharing with you is as a kid, I wasn't a very good reader. So, I really got pulled out of class and paraded to go read, and it really sort of affected me from the standpoint of like thinking that I was, that I wasn't smart. And because I wasn't well in school, I never really, had the impression that I was smart. And, some of what we were talking about was how, luckily for me, going off to college, and just coincidentally being with sort of a group of guys that I had known from Berkeley, and how they were all really motivated to be successful and to actually have careers and do things in their life. And how, there was a point in which it occurred to me that within this group of friends, being competitive, that I did not want to be the loser of the group. And, and then and that really motivated me. And look, those are hard times. It was a struggle, but like once I had a career, and sort of talking with Matt, who, we both know and is an extremely intelligent person, and kind of sharing work stories and sort of how we handle things and our opinions about things, that really changed my perspective of myself and gave me confidence that, I'm actually am smart and I have good intuition and I have good, I have the ability to analyze situations and make good decisions, which really there had been a long history of making relatively bad decisions. And so, that was really profound for me. And it really helped shape my career from an early standpoint. And ultimately, sort of gave me the security and the base to kind of do things outside of my career that ultimately led to, at this point, a successful, happy life.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about sort of where you are in your life right now. Tell us a little bit about how you feel about your life right now.
Well, so I feel extremely lucky I'm very fortunate to have the amazing friends, an amazing family. I've really had just incredible, incredible experiences with different people, and over the course of life, it's ups and it's downs. And when you're in a place of not feeling great, that happens. But I definitely feel very fortunate that on a whole, I'm able to look back on my life and, and really feel happy and blessed. Currently, as you know, I retired, which is very interesting to me because in some ways it puts me back in this period of like in my late 20s where I was, really trying to figure out what the hell I was doing, what I could do, and even though those were somewhat hard times, it was really this period of growth and exploration and, trying things and so to sort of be back in that mindset is amazing because I now have this ability to really shape what I want the next 20 years of my life to look like.
I love that.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think when we come through a certain time period, when we get into our 50s, when we start to get to retirement, and and our children are grown, we tend to return to ourselves in a lot of ways. We return to a commitment to ourselves, and I have found a huge creative burst that's coming out of this. In fact, it's why I want to share these stories and actually cultivate and invite people to tell these stories, because I do think it's a time of reflection, and we have so many gifts that we can share. And what I've found is that when I look back, I see all these moments like you were talking about of change, and I see all these moments of growth, and I think, how did that happen? And I see the connections between. In fact, I'm in awe of the connections between these people that saw me, that loved me, that cared for me, that reflected my intelligence back to me, reflected my goodness back to me, and it actually created a sense of myself. And I hear that in your story, and I love the story that you tell of, playing basketball, just playing basketball with your buddies from your hometown buddies, and then on the way to the basketball game, you having these conversations that reflect back your intelligence. Can you say a little bit more about those times when you were playing basketball with Matt?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that has connected Matt and I was the love of being active and playing sports. And, I mean, fortunately, he's got to the place where he's not doing it anymore. But for, 35 years, like Tuesday was our built-in basketball night. And, we would carpool and we would drive to the basketball court. And, we would have these conversations about, you know, stuff that's going on in our jobs and like dealing with, like, because I was a manager of unionized employees and him as a labor lawyer, we would have these conversations about, oh my God, this is happening, and I mean, and Matt is a very special person to me because we've connected, like, we just have a deep, easy connection. And he's someone that I very much respected. And so to be able to have these conversations and sort of us being on the same page, and knowing his journey and what he went through going to law school, and it just was profound to me because I'm like, well, shit, I didn't go to law school, but these are things that make sense to me. These are things that I think, and to have someone that I respected so much be on the same page, that really elevated my sense of self. And it was interesting because it was a long time of me believing that I wasn't capable, or that I wasn't smart, in your traditional sense, just because of all the struggles that I had gone through as a young person. Um,
In school specifically, right?
yeah, and I mean, mostly in school, and like I believe that people do things and are excited about things where they get positive reinforcement, and so much of my school was negative reinforcement, and so it really turned me off to school, and school was a struggle for me. But some of the things we talked about is, I was very lucky that my family had this base of, believing that college and education was the way to future success. And so even as much of a struggle as school was, there always was this underlying understanding that I was going to go to college and that I was going to finish college. Um, and I feel very lucky, because it wasn't like my parents sat down and said, "You're going to college." It just was the underlying expectation of what I was supposed to do. And ultimately, graduating from college actually gave me a tremendous sense of accomplishment. So that was great.
How long had you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Matt? Because you are still very good friends with Matt, right? You how many times a week do you talk to Matt or text with Matt or see Matt?
I mean, so it's definitely changed over the years due to family and stuff like that. But we played golf yesterday. So we hung out yesterday. But I'll probably talk to him, you know, once a month maybe, and see him once a month. Matt's really good about, if like he hasn't heard, or like if we haven't talked in a while, he'll check in with me, just to say, hey, what's up? Um,
That's awesome.
but one thing that's very special about all my friends is, even throughout life happening, families and all this stuff, we always make special effort to, try to go out to happy hour, or we have these built-in snowboarding trips, we have built-in, biking trips, and so we do really make time for each other, and I have to say, it's special. I mean, I feel very, very lucky for the quality of my friendships and what that means to me.
Yeah, why do you think everybody does that? Well, tell me a little bit about when you met. When did you meet Matt? Because it's interesting to me that this is a hometown friend from sort of my perspective, right? This is someone you met either in high school or even before, in high school, I think it was. And then yet this is someone that you currently are very close to. In fact, when we were one of the reasons I wanted to interview you is because we went on a trip this summer. We went on a biking trip this summer up to Bend, Oregon. We had 8 hours to drive together. I told you about this project. I was hearing Matt's stories and your stories. And one of the things that I loved about witnessing your connection is just how close you guys are. I mean, it's such a brotherhood. And Matt told this great story about somebody talking shit about you and him being so loyal to you. There was no one who's going to talk shit about Mark in front of Matt. He was not going to allow that to happen. And that stuck out for me. And yeah, that's the kind of thing that I'm super inspired by, is the closeness and the loyalty and the connection that we have with our friends that's unlike anything else in our lives.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny because Matt actually gave me the best compliment of my life. Um, which, and I mean, as you know, they were in this car accident. And, like I actually was with them that weekend. Um, and then after the car accident, they needed some help, and one thing that Matt has told me, he's like, out of anybody, you are the one person that I know, if I truly need something, you're the person I'm going to go to, and like even saying that now, it gives chills up my spine, because I think ultimately for me, that's who I want to be, and that's and that gives me the most joy of anything, But it's
amazing.
Matt and I actually, and I'll remember this forever, because But it was the first time I actually met Matt was in the ninth grade, where I was going to St. Mary's and he was at West Campus. But I was going to school with Mark Yeager. We all made plans to meet for the Cal game, and we all met on Tightwad Hill. And Matt had this lunchbox of ragweed that they had like stolen or whatever. And so we all got high off this ragweed that was being pulled out of this like, Racer X freaking lunchbox or whatever. That game ended up being the big game. And so, so it
became Cal Stanford game.
Cal Stanford. So that was actually the first time I had met him. But it's interesting because then I just met him through, Berkeley High and the different groups of people. But very early on, Matt and I started to just hang out, the two of us. Which also for me, because I was an outsider coming into this school, and I was always sort of seeking out friends, and like to then sort of develop a special connection with somebody was special, because that's what I was looking for, and I was trying to connect with people, and to have this connection and have it really from the very beginning be very easy. Like there wasn't a lot of work, we just connected. And now we've been friends ever since. I mean,
how many years is that? 40? More than 40?
Yeah, I mean, probably 38 years.
Yeah, that's a long time to be friends. How do you think your friendship has morphed or changed or stayed the same over those 38 years?
Well, I mean, I think, it gets tough when you start having families and partnering up, and and your focus really becomes your family, and one thing I will say about all of my friends is we've given each other space to have separate lives, and there is, there's an understanding of like, look, you're someone that's important in my life, but my priorities are this, and this is sort of the direction in which I'm going.
It's a complete acceptance of each other, of where you are and your commitments to your family. Most, I think, good friends do that for each other.
Oh, absolutely. And then and it's funny because Kathy always says that I did this, like I did this on purpose, and there may be an element of subconscious or whatever, but like, they got pregnant, and within 2.5 months, I got my ex-wife pregnant. As you know, we ended up having boys, and so the boys, and it's kind of been important to me, and I believe also for Matt, that the boys continue this legacy friendship.
Meaning your kids are friends with each other?
Yeah, like our kids are friends with each other. And so as, I mean, we really kept all of the families and the boys together and doing things and playing sports. And it's really special to see because they don't go to the same school, and that's obviously important or whatever. But when they're together, like when they see each other, they also have sort of this special connection where it's easy and so that's it, like that's amazing to me.
It is amazing. That I never heard that statement before, but it's like a legacy friendship. It's like it's like a family friend that is friend, but it is family. I struggle with these words because I think there's a lack of words that actually describes the connections that friends have. You're either like friends or family, and there's really not a lot of other words that describe the connection that we have. And so I think that we don't have enough words to actually describe how we feel for friends, because it's either like we're as close as family, or you're my good friend, or like that's my best man at my wedding, or something like that. But we just don't have the kind of words that I'm looking for to articulate how special these people are in our lives. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting because, like, you look at family as blood. And what is interesting is, I mean, to some degree, you can't choose your family. And just because you're family doesn't necessarily mean you get along, And, I would say, I mean, look, these are people, especially as you get older. I mean, look, they're probably more important than you than family. I mean, I share and rely on my friends way more than I do my parents, and
Totally.
and to your point, I mean, these people that you choose to have in your life, you have the ability to bring such growth and awareness and change, to some degree, I would say more than your family, I mean,
completely.
Your family message seems to get diluted because you've heard it so long and you're not picking it, when with your friends, you're actually picking it.
It's amazing. I mean, it really is what's so special, I think, about friendships is you choose these people and they choose you, and it's mutual, because otherwise you wouldn't be friends, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've told you this. I mean, look, Berkeley's a crazy place. I was definitely on the fence and easily could have gone either direction. And I truly, and I personally don't understand this, because I had different friend groups, and luckily, by the way things worked out, I gravitated more so to the friends that were, an upward trajectory, as opposed to, friends with a lower trajectory, which in all fairness, short term would have been easier. It takes work.
Totally.
Like, get your shit together and stuff like that. And so, like, I do just truly feel blessed. I mean, I'm not a religious guy or anything like that, but I like to use that word because I mean, the quality and what, the people have done for me in my life, to me, it's really a blessing.
You're a Catholic schoolboy. You could use the word blessed.
Well,
That's good. That's good.
The only reason why is because Oakland was such shitty schools, and my parents are like, all right, well, it's either public schools or parochial schools, and just sit there and pretend, like.
Actually, I think we can use blessed to feel lucky and to feel fortunate. And even if you don't sort of think there is a God that is blessing you in some way, or Jesus Christ, or some other version of that text, I understand what that word means. I use it all the time as well, because I do feel ingratitude, that it's almost like a surprise gratitude of what has happened to me and for me, and specifically how these people have made a difference in my life. And I took it for granted. I didn't even know that it was happening when it was happening.
Yeah, well, and that's, because look, the reality is there's lots of unfortunate things that could happen, like that are out of your control. And so, like it just, I mean, living a dream. It's amazing.
It is amazing. Can you? I know you have to go, but I want one more story that I really love and that really makes me curious about your story. Is this connection with Skyler, and Skyler being another sort of hometown friend, someone you met in high school? So maybe you could tell me the story of meeting Skyler and sort of your friendship there and the influence that he's had on you.
Well, so I mean, Skyler's an interesting guy because Skyler was just always in some ways above everybody else. Like I mean, I think he just early on he had this aura, that I was sort of drawn to, And what's funny because we always joke because he's all like, "I didn't know you in high school," and I'm like, "You fucking dick" or whatever. I met Skyler in high school, but then as it turned out, I went and worked at La Coco's, and he was the manager. He was the manager of La Coco's, which even that sort of to me illustrates what a special guy this is. I mean, here he is, a senior in high school, and he's put in charge of a restaurant. And like very few people have the ability to do that, at that age.
This is not Burger King. This is La Coco's. This is a pizza joint that serves Berkeley's like still around. It was one of the better pizza places in Berkeley at that point. Yeah,
absolutely. And then the other thing that always like Skyler always knew what he wanted to do. And he systematically went about doing that. But like I mean, it's just it's because Skyler was always just a special person to me. And then as it turned out, he lived in my neighborhood, and then he started to come over all the time. And we really bonded over our interest in real estate. And Skyler's a very deep, thoughtful person, like, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of my friends, they're not like Matt he's not like, you can't really rely on Matt for emotional support, but
okay.
with in terms of like, oh my God, I'm, struggling, Matt will just be like, dude, get it together, But like with Skyler, he's willing to go deep and he's willing to analyze shit, and that's, like that's something that I like, but yeah, Skyler's pivotal because in a lot of ways, he is kind of been the leader that I'm able to follow. And we do things differently, but he was always such a trailblazer that I always looked up to him and his ability and trusted him. And so to have someone in my life that I could talk about shit and go back and forth, and and Skyler was a little bit always ahead of the curve in terms of like, even in high school he was working and a manager or whatever.
Right.
So Skyler's another one of the amazing people in my life.
Yeah, I love that we have these different friends that almost serve different purposes in our lives, right? You have this, you're loyal, you're Matt, who reflects your intelligence back, but he might not actually reflect or feel comfortable about, as you said, going deep or supporting you in a hard time and actually giving you sort of an empathic sense. But then you have this other person who is different, who is a different personality, who has a different upbringing, who serves a different purpose in our lives to actually give us a sense of, it's okay, or listening, and not, we go to them because they're different and they have different ways of relating to us and they reflect different things back. Like when you go through hard times, you do need people to empathically connect with us and not judge us and not actually say, get it together, right? To say, actually, that sounds fucking hard, right? That's also a really good friend. And they're good. They're both really good friends, but they're different. They serve different purposes in our lives.
Well, and what's really interesting about Matt is like, I actually strive to be more like Matt, in the sense that like, look, we all get in our head, we're dealing with shit or whatever. And one thing I've always appreciated with Matt's like, it just doesn't matter. Like, just,
I love that too, yeah.
Like, I actually kind of strive for that because in a lot of ways it doesn't matter. Like some of this stuff is all self-created, or oftentimes it's self-doubt that's really the pain, or your ego that's really causing the pain. And to have the, totally. Like to be guided to a perspective of like, it's just, I mean, like, I love this about like, we'll take pictures, and someone's going to post it or whatever. It's like, well, let me see what you're posting. Oh, I hate that picture or whatever. Matt will look at me and like, dude, that's what you look like. It's you, I mean, and just like, it's true. Like, this is you. Like, stop worrying about, because a lot of times worried about what other people think. Like, who cares,
Thanks for listening to this brief interview with my friend Mark. I was moved by the story of how his friend Matt reflected his intelligence back to him and thus increased his overall self-confidence. We often take for granted the powerful psychological effects that friendship have on our self-esteem, and often attributing this sense of self to a person's family, or parents in particular. But what's so evident is that friends have even more effect on how we view ourselves than our families do, because in adolescent development, our identity formation comes from how our friends treat us. Developmental psychologist Erik Erikson believed that forming a personal identity was one of the most important phases of life. Developing a strong sense of self serves as sort of a compass that helps guide each person through the rest of their life, and adolescents begin to explore the basic question of who am I? Teens focus on figuring out what they believe and who they are and what they want to become. Those who are allowed to go through this personal exploration and successfully master this stage emerge with a strong sense of independence, personal agency, and a strong sense of self. And Erikson called this virtue fidelity. Those who fail to complete this stage often enter adulthood confused about who they are and what they want out of life. Mark's stories about his friends Matt and Skyler make evident that he looked to these guys as role models of responsibility and intelligence, and was not only motivated by the fear of being a loser, as he said, but moreover, a desire to belong with them and the group that he was part of. He put the work in and he achieved his goals to become financially successful, and he progressed through the next developmental phases of what Erikson calls intimacy. And he went into fatherhood, and now he's in the phase of generativity. Now, this stage is marked by the need to create something that will continue on after we leave and make a lasting mark on the world. This not only involves raising our children, but taking care of others, like our parents, and being a good friend, which is how he successfully is achieving this, is by his loyalty and his steadfast commitment to his friends, Matt and Skyler. Similarly, I've identified this podcast as my attempt to contribute to the world and make a lasting impression. And I give my son Ellery credit for challenging me and asking me, hey, Dad, how have you contributed to your profession or to make the world a better place? And I hope to make Ellery proud, but I ask all of us, how are we going to make the world a better place and leave a lasting impression? And if you have a good answer, please follow this podcast on Instagram at Hometown Friends Pod. Or better yet, subscribe to the Hometown Friends YouTube channel and comment on this episode. If you think someone will like this content, please take a minute to share it with your friends and family and your social network. I hope to hear from you, and stay connected to your friends.
We fall down, but we get up.